right, everyone, welcome back to the old switcheroo where we're talking gaming retro with Mike and Jaymo.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Jaymo. Join us on our epic quest to research and review all 200 plus games in the Nintendo Switch Online retro catalog. Today, we'll be sticking and moving into the classic Nintendo boxing games Punch-Out and Super Punch-Out in an episode that we are calling Let's Get Ready to Rage Quit! Now, Mike, I'm excited for this very special episode of the Old Switcheroo. Inspired by our friends over at the Cable Club podcast, we are having our very first showdown episode. We're going to be putting these two classic boxing titles in the ring and seeing which one comes out on top. But no boxing match would be complete without a referee. Would you mind introducing our longtime friend and potential tiebreaker?
All right, yeah. So joining us in the center of the ring is Bryan Lee.
Hello.
Wait, center of the ring? I don't think Bryan's fighting.
That's where the referee has to be at the start of a fight.
Oh yeah, or the announcer, or I suppose I didn't agree to be the referee here, but I didn't realize I'm the tiebreaker.
I mean, we just introduced you as a referee, so I think we're going to make the referee.
Sure.
Well, Bryan, welcome back to the show. This is your third appearance on the Old Switcheroo, but you've never been on to talk about a retro game. You appeared on our Screen Time episodes in which we previewed the phenomenal season of X-Men 97, and then you co-hosted with your girlfriend Fong on our season recap and ranking episode. So would you mind giving our listeners a quick rundown of your experience with just old Nintendo games and the Punch-Out franchise specifically?
Well, anyways, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to finally be on an episode about a game, no less. Well, even though like X-Men 97 definitely touched on gaming,
Those games.
But yeah, and also to be joined by our friend Mike on this one. But yeah, no, the NES was my first console. We didn't have it new. I remember we got it secondhand from somebody else. Yeah, and I only really had two games for it. I think it was Mario 3 and what was it? Was it Double Dribble? Or not Double Dribble.
I guess Punch Out.
No, well, like I didn't own a copy myself. I remember I would play Punch Out a lot on friends' houses, and so that's where I got a lot of my experience with this with the original Mike Tyson's Punch Out. But yeah, like I have a lot of fond memories of the original, Punch Out, and it's so burned into my memory the theme song. Like I think it's such a classic theme, and ironically, I mean, because I never had a Super Nintendo myself, although I definitely played some SNES games, on other people's systems and stuff like that. It wasn't until literally like about a week and a half ago that I finally played its sequel, and so a lot of that is very fresh in my mind right now because it's
That's awesome.
I don't have that. I mean, I feel like I'm going to be a little bit more biased on some level to Mike Tyson's Punch Out because of the nostalgia that I have for it. But yeah, no, Super Punch Out was it was a long time coming to finally play its sequel.
That's awesome. Happy to give you the reason to. And boys, what's your relationship to professional boxing? Because my interest, it begins and ends with Mark Wahlberg and Christian Bale in The Fighter, which is probably top 10 movies of all time. But I don't like boxing as a sport. It makes me uncomfortable seeing people get that hurt. And it just seems something very, I don't know, cruel in like sort of an ancient Greece sort of way about like just the pure violence of it. I don't know. I might be losing a lot of fans right now, but I'm not a boxing guy. What about you, Mike? What's your relationship to the sport or the sweet science as they call it?
As a sport, I really don't care about it. Just it holds no interest to me. However, it was a really big deal for a good couple decades in Hollywood. And so I have watched an unnervingly large number of boxing movies that came out in the 1930s.
Wait, so unnervingly large meaning like triple digits?
I wouldn't say triple, but it's definitely in the double digits. There's probably 20 to 30 of them.
Dang.
There's a lot of them. Mike's right.
There's a whole lot.
Bryan, what about you? Do you like boxing as a sport? Did you ever watch it growing up?
I don't have a lot of memory of watching the actual sport itself. I mean, well, especially since I feel like, a lot of times actual boxing was on stuff like HBO, pay-per-view kind of stuff.
Right.
But yeah. I definitely loved the movies, or at the very least, I've always been something of a fan of the entire Rocky and Creed series of movies. And I mean every single one. I actually celebrate Rocky 5. And a lot of people like to shit on that one, but it's like I honestly think it's actually better than Rocky 4. And I know, that's a bit of a hot take because a lot of people fucking love Rocky 4, but
what about
but
Rocky
no.
7, Adrian's Revenge?
Well, you know what? I mean, they did. Well, let's see, because Rocky Balboa is Rocky 6. So Rocky 7 is arguably Creed.
Right.
I mean, Adrian wasn't in it, and I mean, she was dead by that point. Spoiler alert. But
Please, they kill up Adrian.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least.
Just stop.
Okay, well, I mean, a lot of time passes, and everyone gets older. Eventually, characters pass away.
Okay, I see what you're saying. In the reboots, yeah, it's funny because like one of my favorite podcasts, Kind of Funny, they do the rankings of all the different movies, franchises. So they've ranked every Aliens movie, every Terminator movie, like any franchise you can imagine. And I've been meaning to get into Rocky so I could listen to those episodes, but now I know Adrian dies. So what's the point of watching it?
No, it's a great franchise that definitely had like, I mean, the original Rocky, the one that famously got nominated for Best Picture, like that one. It's a quintessential underdog story. I mean, and the franchise goes right into tacky kind of sequels that are very very cheesy. But I think like they know that they're cheesy, and like my personal favorite has always been Rocky 3 for lots of different reasons. I feel like like I feel like it's the best blend of like somewhere between serious and cheesy, but also had like really emotional moments. I won't spoil the character death that happens in that one, but
not that character death you won't spoil.
No, but I mean, it's got Mr. T. I don't know. I loved Rocky 3, but yeah,
a boxing franchise that kind of has tongue-in-cheek cheesiness. That seems like a perfect segue into our games. Can we get started?
Yes.
Sure. Okay.
All right. So let's get into tonight's matchups. In the red corner, hailing from the twilight years of the Reagan era, at 13 1/3 centimeters, weighing in at a whopping 113 grams, it's the NES port about a boxer that's short, Punch-Out, featuring Mr. Dream.
Or Mr. Tyson, depending on which version you're playing.
Exactly, yeah, we'll get into that.
Sure.
And in the blue corner, coming into the world the year Kurt Cobain left, at 8 1/4 centimeters, and weighing in at a respectable 85 grams, it's got 16 bits and all the hits, Super Punch-Out for the SNES. So we're going to be putting these two games head-to-head against each other and deciding which one reigns supreme. Tonight's matchup is unofficially brought to you by Microsoft Copilot, which took the descriptions of both games from Nintendo Switch Online and combined them for our convenience. It reads... In the captivating universe of the World Video Boxing Association, players take on the role of Little Mac, a young hopeful aiming for the championship title. Beginning with the slender Glass Joe and progressing through a lineup of formidable opponents like King Hippo, players must masterfully land jabs, hooks, and power uppercuts to secure victories. Each bout demands acute attention to the opponent's movements as players dodge and weave to avoid knockout punches. The game, celebrated for its engaging gameplay and comedic elements, throws players into the intense battles of the minor, major, and world circuits. Here they'll confront legendary adversaries such as Bear Hugger, Bald Bull, and Super Macho Man, along with a slew of new challengers. It's a game of keen observation and strategy as players seek to uncover and exploit the distinct patterns for each fighter. Heeding the sage advice of Doc Lewis, it's not about brawling, it's about finesse. Players are tasked with finding the perfect balance between strength and skill to triumph in this addictive, action-filled journey that blends excitement with a sprinkle of humor. What do you guys think about Microsoft Copilot's description of the Punch-Out franchise?
Oh, very nice. If anything, I love your delivery. That's very, very boxing announcer.
Thank you.
Should have had a microphone drop on the ceiling.
Yeah, well, I would do that, but it would screw up the audio for Mike. Mike made a face at my Kurt Cobain joke. I don't know. This game did come out the year Kurt Cobain died, so...
that wasn't I think that's factually inaccurate reaction.
It's a weird
just like, why did you go there? Well, let's go here. Let's get some trivia on the Punch-Out series with our Knowledge is Nintendo Power segment. The original Punch-Out arcade cabinet had two screens, one displaying the fight and another showing the scoreboard. According to GameRant, Nintendo's decision to incorporate a second screen came from a surplus of monitors that they had purchased in the wake of Donkey Kong's runaway success. So using two screens instead of one allowed them to liquidate their excess inventory while charging more per unit. What do you think of that, Mike?
I really wish Donkey Kong's runaway success was actually just a game title. I'm not sure what the gameplay would be, but
Right.
that's what I see in my head.
Yeah, Donkey Kong's runaway success has a great ring to it. So, Nsidr.com reported that after the arcade game was released to considerable success, the founder of Nintendo America, Minoru Arakawa, hopefully I'm saying that right, attended a Mike Tyson boxing match and was so impressed that he offered Tyson 50 grand to license his game and image for the NES port. So, Brian, was this the version you played?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Like this is like I've always associated Mike Tyson with this game and him being the final boss. And
Yeah.
yeah, honestly, it threw me off a little bit playing it on the Switch and then realizing, oh right, this is the version without him after I guess their license expired or something. So
Well, so when they offered him this license, to license his likeness for the game, it was kind of a huge gamble because he hadn't yet clinched the heavyweight championship. And so there was a lot of negotiation, apparently Nintendo being like, well, if this guy loses, less people are going to want to play the game.
yeah.
But he won. It was a hugely well televised match. His fame skyrocketed. But then conversely, Nintendo chose not to renew the license after Tyson's first ever defeat at the hands of Buster Douglas in Tokyo on February 11th, 1990, which many to this day claim to be one of the most shocking upsets in sporting history. Tyson's likeness was whitewashed into the character Mr. Dream, and I would say the rest is infamy. So, Brian, what do you think of the rebranding of the game from Mike Tyson's Punch Out to being separated from Tyson?
I mean, it's a little weird to me because I always grew up with the Tyson version. I always, associated him with the game, like I said. So,
Yeah.
to me, it's always been Mike Tyson's Punch Out. I understand they lost that license with him and everything, but even right down to what is it like? I think it was on Jimmy Fallon on his Tonight Show that that he actually brought Mike Tyson on like somewhat recently, like within the last couple of years, to like to play the game and against himself. And like culturally, everyone associates that first NES game with Mike Tyson. It was literally right there in the title. I understand they for legal reasons had to change that. So no, it's not Mr. Dream. Come on.
Yeah,
we all know who it is.
absolutely agree. The console sequel, Super Punch Out for the SNES, features graphics and a camera perspective more similar to the other arcade titles. It was also available for download via Nintendo Power. Now, boys, when I tell you that you could download it via Nintendo Power, what do you think that means?
I mean, wasn't Nintendo Power a magazine?
Right, exactly. And apparently in Japan, it was actually called, it was a downloadable kiosk service. They would set up these Nintendo Power kiosks in electronic stores throughout Japan, and it allowed customers to insert their own rewritable cartridges and download games at a discount. So you'd buy like a blank SNES game, and then for like, half the price, let's say, you don't get the cartridge and the box and the manual, you just get the data. No, I never knew this existed, but I thought it was kind of neat, kind of early DLC.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool concept. I was not aware of either.
Didn't know it, and weird that it was called Nintendo Power. I don't know if maybe that's a mistranslation on the research I found here. This was
Hmm.
an image courtesy of Giant Bomb, though. So in addition to his most well-known cameo in Smash Brothers, Punch-Out protagonist Little Mac also appeared in the GameCube edition of EA boxing game Fight Night Round 2. He was an unlockable character in that game. And Little Mac also appears in Captain Rainbow, a Nintendo Wii game that has you playing as a disgraced superhero trying to rebrand by traveling to an island of forgotten Nintendo mascots that are in need of a glow up. So Little Mac appears as morbidly obese Big Mac, who you need to whip into shape
Oh
to
my
get him back
goodness.
into his former glory.
I had no idea about this, and I'm seeing the image of him for the first time. That's wow. He really let himself go, poor guy.
Well, I mean, Brian, you expressed interest in our Super Mario 2 episode. We're gonna come back to Captain Rainbow because are you aware of Birdo's involvement in this game?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Yeah, quite infamous.
Yeah.
Last two pieces of trivia before we get to our main event. I had to include this for Brian. Brian's gonna get a good chuckle out of this. Brian, did you know that Punch Out in the arcades had a arm wrestling spin-off sequel?
Hey, it's like over the top.
Come on, son.
Tying it to another Sylvester Stallone franchise. Well, I say franchise. They only made
Yeah,
one
there's only the
arm
one.
wrestling movie, but you only need yeah, every professional sport needs one movie. I'm still waiting for the competitive eating movie.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then
You mean
this
other
is
than
for
Scarface?
Oh,
no,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
Scarface, not Scarf Face.
No, I'm talking
Okay.
about Scarface.
No,
Oh, is
How
there
was
a
that?
movie about like
Yeah,
or at least
Whoa!
yes. Yeah, it blends between documentary and things I don't actually believe, and I have no idea where that boundary is.
Right,
see.
mockumentary. It's a documentary where they don't take it too seriously.
It's just a documentary I don't trust.
Oh, okay. Sounds very modern.
Well, about the competitive eating scene, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, actually, now that I think about it, I think I recall there being something, or at least a movie.
I think I've
named
mentioned
after-
this to you before that you should check this out.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, I'm something of also something of a fan of competitive eating. I'm looking very forward to Chestnut and Kobayashi this this Labor Day.
Yeah, I mean, this episode will come out after that probably.
Are they doing
Uh,
a separate thing? Because wasn't
Yes.
he banned?
Like Kobayashi was banned many years ago
Oh,
for not
right.
signing an exclusivity deal, and then Chestnut was banned like a week ago, or at least
Yeah.
like by the time people listen to this, a couple months
Mike,
ago.
are
So-
you also into the world of competitive eating? I know we're getting off topic. We'll get back in a
Sure.
second, I promise.
No, I'm just fat. That's different.
It's for the love of the game.
It still needs its fictional movie, I guess. Well, maybe with Sylvester Stallone.
Speaking of fictional, there's one more little piece of trivia I got to include because we have both of you on the same podcast, and that's one of the coolest Punch Out references ever. Do you guys know what I'm referring to?
Yes.
Oh,
Super Slugfest, season 1, episode 6. In addition to being the debut of Bleeding Gums Murphy, it also features a B story in which Homer trains at the arcade to beat Bart in Super Slugfest. The visual similarities to Punch Out are really obvious. He even refers to the game as the world of video boxing, which is word for word the actual boxing league in Punch Out. And as a kid, it infuriated me that Homer finally gets good enough to kill Bart, and then right when Marge unplugs it, Bart announces his retirement from the world of video boxing, undefeated. I'm like, oh, I hated him so much.
but it's so often the tactic of I can remember many times playing fighting games with you, Jeremy, and anytime you usually have the upper hand. You are genuinely between us the better gamer, but sometimes when I was starting to get the upper hand, you just smack the control out of my hand. And just
Okay, but those times when I would smack the controller out of your hand and you would catch it and then still beat me, isn't that make victory all the sweeter?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
All right, so for tonight's preliminary matchup, it's a rumble in the retail jungle. Punch Out versus Super Punch Out, a literal boxing match. So we're going to decide which game has the best box art. First, we got to decide which NES version has the better box art. So we're looking here, Mike Tyson's Punch Out versus the re-release Punch Out featuring Mr. Dream. Mike, which one do you prefer? The photos of Mike Tyson or the more kind of painterly art of the remake?
Well, first of all, I was going to say it was interesting. I didn't realize until this that they refer to the Mike Tyson fight as the Dream Bout.
Yes.
Which then makes why Mr. Dream is the name they go for make a lot more sense.
Sure.
I think of the two, I feel like it has to go with the Mike Tyson cover.
Yeah. Both feature the titular final boss. So either Mike Tyson on the original release and then Mr. Dream. The Mike Tyson one is actual photos of him. You can even see his like Everlast branded gloves. And there is a referee kind of standing in the center of the frame. And then the protagonist character getting punched is off frame in both versions. Yeah, I mean, Brian, put your bias aside, okay? Judging them, because Brian, you're also, I don't know if people know this, podcast listeners might not know this, but you're an amazing artist. So artistically, judging them, layout wise and the dynamism of it. Would you also agree with Mike? Mike Tyson's Punch Out's a better cover.
Yeah, I'm inclined to lean that way, but I do got to give credit to the Mr. Dream version. The lettering of Punch Out is much more striking and more stylized. But I also got to give it to not just that Mike Tyson's there in the original, but that I like the way that they incorporate his autograph there. Like Mike Tyson's autograph is right above Punch Out, and
Yeah.
just the realism of seeing the photo of him, knowing that this is a real life boxing star, and
Yeah, and
and he's
I
the
think
big
that
villain.
is why the lettering is less interesting on
Mm,
that one, is because one of them at the top is Mike Tyson.
right.
As soon as you get rid of Mike Tyson, then they make the name bigger because now they've lost the main selling point.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I
I
get
think
you.
Yeah.
the positioning looks artificial on the drawn one. The arm movement doesn't actually look like a punch. Mike Tyson actually looks like he's punching someone.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah, I'm there with you. I
Absolutely.
mean, the perspective too on the illustrated one is sort of like that. There's no camera angle. That doesn't look like it makes sense where the referee's standing when you look at the ropes in the background. Yeah, all around the photo one is still the way to go, I think.
I had a feeling we were going to feel that way. So then let's compare it to Super Punch Out's box art. So Super Punch Out takes kind of a different approach. Rather than showing a fight happening, it is a kind of illustrated, sort of almost Sunday morning comic sort of look, where you have three of the returning antagonists: Mr. Sandman from Philadelphia, Bald Bull from Istanbul, and Super Macho Man from Los Angeles, all drawn in the cartoony styling of the actual game. I did think it's weird though. Like, you have Super Punch Out and you have all these new characters, and the three you put on the box are the three that were in the original game. Like, you don't want to show off a single new character.
And I'm surprised that they didn't have any problems with keeping Super Macho Man around,
What do you mean?
because I would have expected that to have been a problem with the wrestler
Macho Man
Macho.
Randy Savage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, I
Huh.
mean, I see what you mean, Jeremy, about like that you took the only three returning characters and put them on the cover. You would think that maybe they'd be saving some more. And honestly, I remember knowing that these again, like I only really played this game for the first time a couple weeks ago, and so I remember knowing that these characters were returning. I expected that there were more than the three that I knew that were back, but clearly they were also marketing for the people who love the original, and they were banking on the nostalgia, like, hey, play the sequel game, these characters are back, so
Yeah.
yeah, I
It's
mean, if
also the
anything,
only
like I like that it showcases the characters a little bit more than just the top villain, which obviously for the first game they had to change, so
one of the three boxes. It's the only one that actually sort of reveals the cartoony aesthetic of it. Like, Punch Out does not take itself seriously.
no.
Looking at the other covers, you might think this is just like a legit, boxing simulator. So I like that too. But I mean, I gotta give, between the two, I gotta give it to the original Mike Tyson's Punch Out. I just think, especially since there's sort of an excitement to this image because it's become rare, you know.
Yeah.
And there's so much interesting history with Mike Tyson's involvement in the game. I think NES takes this one. Mike, what about
Oh,
you?
I'm realizing I don't think any part of that cover reflects the game that I played,
Which one?
of the Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
Because you didn't get to Mike Tyson.
I didn't get I didn't play Mike Tyson. Like, Mike Tyson's not in the game.
Right.
right.
The other boxer is a white character in Punch Out
Yeah.
True.
and is a black boxer here. And I am confident that that referee is not Mario.
You know
And
what? I never really thought about it until now, but Mike is absolutely right. Like, he's not fighting Little Mac, and that is absolutely not Mario. Doesn't even have a mustache.
Yeah, because
Right.
my because Punch Out is arguably part of the Mario franchise.
Yeah, because Mario's a referee.
Yeah, I think it was 4% of people considered it a major or minor mainline Super Mario game, and another 11% considered it a non-canon Mario game, according to there's a video by Jan Masoli
Okay.
of how many Super Mario Brothers games are there,
Oh, interesting.
and he did a survey with like 360 games. It's an amazing video. It will be in the show notes. But
Absolutely.
Punch Out is in there as a what percentage of people that did this considered it a major game, a minor game, or a non-canon Mario game. And you could also say it's not a Mario game. And of course, other games that we've talked about, like tennis and pinball from NES, are also in there at small amounts.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing, but it's very clearly Mario, not just looks like Mario, but is called Mario by name in the game.
Wasn't it also, correct me if I'm wrong, the first appearance of Mario? Or I guess that would have been Donkey Kong, I guess.
That would have been Donkey Kong. Yeah.
Okay.
Jumpman, as he was known back then.
All right.
Well, so, but Mike, you still never actually answered the question, though, between Super Punch-Out and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out cover. Which one are you giving it to?
Oh, and entirely to Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm there with him, but I do gotta, I second Mike's point about how it also is less representative of the game in a lot of ways, because not just, that's not Little Mac, that's not Mario, and Mike Tyson, like this game was notoriously super difficult, and you only really get to Mike Tyson at the very end. So a lot of people's experience, including my own as a kid, like I never got to that fight. Like it was you still always considered like this Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and him being tied to the game, but so many kids never got there.
Well, it seems like a good point to ask. Brian, have you ever beaten this game?
No, I still haven't actually. Only recently actually got to Mr. Dream, because it's not the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out version on the Switch, but yeah, it was. And look, I'm not gonna lie. I used a lot of the save states and rewind features to be able to get there, because this game was so fucking hard. So I got to Mr. Dream. I did not beat Mr. Dream.
Wow, I mean, but you got to him. We got the last fight. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, but it was a lot of rewind.
Mike, have you ever beaten this game?
No, I put a significant amount of time in here. So I'm 120 matches in.
Wow.
I'm currently 53 and 67. And I have finally, the last push was I finally got past Bumble to finish the second circuit, and then started on the third, and I am just being annihilated by Piston Honda currently.
Nice. Yeah, that's tough. Well, guys, you might hate me, but I did beat this game.
Nintendo! Family computer.
And Brian, you ain't kidding, man. I don't think I've ever abused the rewind feature so shamefully as this game, because like every mistake you have to correct it to not lose the edge.
Yeah, it's insane. Like the incredibly short windows of tells that they start giving you, not that far into the game either, that like it's I mean, I know a lot has been said about just gaming in general, especially back in the days of NES, where there were so many notoriously difficult games, Ninja Turtles and Battletoads, but like this was often listed as one of them, or at the very least, Mike Tyson being one of the most difficult bosses in game history. And it was almost to the point of like, and I remember thinking this as a kid too, like, why is this game this hard? Because so many of us, including myself when I was, playing it recently, are just getting like so mad at it. And just like, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people are a little bit nostalgic of when games were a little bit, in general, more challenging, but there was no reason for them to make it this difficult.
To its credit, I do feel like I would reach a point with several of these where I'd be going through it for a while, and eventually something would click, and it would be this is the thing that I'm needing to do
For each fight.
So, yeah, to sort of figure out for those. Like I lost to King Hippo 21 times in a row.
Dang.
Well, I'm also curious, Mike, like, have you been looking at guides and hints at basically like strategies for each of these characters? Because I know I wouldn't have been able to get, I was about to say beat it, but I never, yeah, I think I made I tried 2 attempts at Mr. Dream, and I was like, nope. Like, especially since like at that point, literally a single hit knocks you out. It's insane.
Crazy.
Not really. The one thing that I had going into this a little bit was, and it applied to some of these, was some knowledge of how the speedruns handle things, which sometimes touched on the mechanics that were involved.
I see.
Gotcha. Well, we're gonna get to the characters and the mechanics and everything when we do the two games against each other. Let's resolve this boxing match though. So I think by TBO, the winner of this literal boxing match between the NES and the SNES covers is Mike Tyson's Punch Out. For a lot of the reasons you guys are talking about, just like, Mike Tyson's infamy as the final boss of this game adds so much cool factor to the cover. So now it's time for our main event, brought to you by the Cable Club podcast. It's the old switcheroo Punch Out, Punch Out. We'll be pitting these two games against each other in a fight to the finish. As we cover the joy pros and joy cons of each game, we'll be debating which title, Punch Out or Super Punch Out, has superior strength in the realm of characters, presentation, and gameplay, declaring which game is the true champion of the World Video Boxing Association and which one gets knocked out cold. Let's start with round one. Characters. So let's start off looking at the characters that Mike and Bryan were talking about. Mike mentioned he had a hard time against King Hippo. I'm showing on the YouTube video here a image of all of the Punch Out characters. And by the way, leave a comment if you know where this image came from, because I did my research but could not find the origin of it, and I want to give due credit. So, Bryan, you spent a lot of time with these characters as a kid. Do you have a favorite opponent or a most hated opponent that you have strong memories going up against?
Well, I mean, before I started playing it on the Switch, and I guess all my years of playing it as a kid, I could not beat Great Tiger. So he was, for me personally, like the one I hated the most because I just couldn't figure out. Well, for one thing, I literally didn't know until I was playing on the Switch that you can block. I was always just using just punching
Dodge.
and dodging, and
Yeah.
like I just could not get past I forget the name of when Great Tiger does that.
It's like the tiger kick or tiger punch. Tiger punch. That's right.
Well, it's when he does that it's like shifting, moving really, really fast type of thing, and I realized it's actually impossible. I mean, goes back to what I was asking you about before, Mike. Is like I don't think I would have been able to figure out that you cannot dodge it. You have to block. So things like that. Like I think this game, like a lot of games back then, often it wasn't as intuitive. Obviously, people would sort of through trial and error be able to sort of figure out strategies, figure out patterns. That's the best way to sort of advance in these games if you don't have a guide. But at the same time, like there are certain things that like I didn't realize you literally can't dodge that. You have to block them, and so things like that. Like it helped to look into these, and maybe they intentionally designed games like these so you would buy stuff like Nintendo Power or like or guides or what have you, and maybe and also that was part of the fun of playing games like these, is that we would tell each other about things like like the hidden whistle in Mario and stuff like that you probably wouldn't be able to find yourself. So yeah. So anyways, Great Tiger was the limit of how far I went before, and so I was just always pissed off at him because I knew I can't beat this guy, but I did beat him a couple weeks ago, and so
that's awesome. And Mike had a hard time against King Hippo. So a lot of these characters I really like. They're cartoony, they're animated, they all have these little flourishes that really build out the personality. And King Hippo's, he's got this bandage on his belly, but like you have to wait till his pants fall. Like his shorts will fall down and then you can pop him in the gut and get like an instant KO. Mike, did you ever figure that out, or did you just get around the fight without learning his weak spot?
I mean, it's not that you do that. It's that you have to hit him in the mouth, so that the shorts drop, and then you have an opportunity to get in as many punches as you can. So you have to do that like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I hope you don't mind, if we talk about things that strategy wise, I guess. But I mean, I that's more or less the trick. Once you figure out the trick with King Hippo, he'll become easy. Like so yeah, you're right. It's a matter of hitting him in the mouth, and then that he drops his pants. Just keep hitting him in the belly, and you only need to knock him out once.
Yeah, that's the other big thing that I didn't know until it happened.
He won't get back up.
Yeah, and then it was really easy to realize that okay, if I'm having trouble with getting the timing right, I'm just going to go for the punch to the face every time I get the chance and hope his mouth is open, because I didn't have to worry about dodging that much. I just kind of had to outlast. which actually does line up with what the speedrunners do to some extent, because they're relying on the chance that he opens his mouth,
Right.
which is a little bit less than 50%.
Yeah, there's a lot of notorious RNG in this game, which I know is the bane of speedrunners. Yeah.
Yeah, and so for me, that was just like, oh, okay, I'm not really worried about how fast this is going to happen, but I'm just going to presume that happens, because if I get hit, I'm still in this, because I only have to knock him out once.
Right.
But yeah, definitely my hat's off to anybody who, if they exist, if anybody's managed to beat this game without knowing any strategies and having to figure it out on their own. Like,
Brutal.
I mean, to know stuff like hitting bull at the right time during his bull charge, like how are you going to know that without, being clued in some way that's what
the
you're supposed
hint
to do?
Kind of started to help.
The hint?
Yeah, because you get hints from the ring. If you have to survive a round, which was a total pain.
Yes.
But it is something about how you basically have to stand up to that charge. And I was like, okay, so I can't, because I reached it once and I just kept dodging and it just kept coming.
Yeah.
He just kept going, and it was like, I am clearly, or it's like I survived a round, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
And
so you have a good point. Like to this game's credit, if you're struggling, then yeah, like Doc will often drop you a bit of a hint to figure out the strategy. Yeah.
Sometimes they're super cryptic, but there were ones like that. It's like, okay, there is something to this.
But I love that though, that in between the rounds, like, Doc, he's fulfilling that role that he would in an actual boxing match. He's giving you the advice. Did you guys ever use the cheat for this screen? Do you know what I'm talking about? Right. So it's very simple. When Doc is giving you advice, press the select button. You can do it once per matchup, and he will pat your shoulder and heal you all the way.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I didn't know that. Oh,
yeah,
good to know.
and it's so simple. It feels like they intended you to find it. Or Mike, was that in the manual? I'm guessing no, since
I thought it was in the manual. I was checking that right now.
Okay, yeah, but I think though that these little corner moments, I guess we'll call them, because they're both each against their turnbuckle. It's like it added a lot of character.
Absolutely. I think if anything, that's one of the things, not to jump ahead too much, but like that's one of the things I feel like is missing from Super Punch Out, is that
100%.
Like literally, obviously Doc isn't there, but trainers in general, like trainers, like especially to go back to Rocky, like just as iconic. Well, maybe not just as iconic as Rocky is Mickey. Like Burgess Meredith. The Penguin.
Oh God, Mickey dies too, doesn't he? I think I just remembered that. Like Mr.
Does.
Brian, quit spoiling Rocky for me.
But still, like Mickey, the trainers are such a big deal in that franchise, or just in general.
Although if it makes you feel better, he may die, but he does get a brisk iced tea.
Nice. I love that commercial. but still, like Mickey being his trainer, and then after Mickey, that minor spoilers, but Apollo Creed becoming his trainer is such a big deal. And then come the Creed movies, when like Rocky is Adonis Creed's trainer. Like the trainer is so important to the boxing franchise. So I just the Doc not being there in the sequel is that's just a major loss. And
yeah,
also, I had no idea that Doc can give you this total health boost.
Yeah, which is totally in the manual. Like when it shows you the controls, it's like, press this button to get extra stamina.
Yeah. I think if we can give Joy-Cons about the characters in the first Punch Out, is that, quite a few of them lean really hard on stereotypes that haven't necessarily aged well.
Oh, yeah.
I think Piston Honda might be the worst example, because in between matches, he just says sushi, kamikaze, Fujiyama, Nipponichi. It's like literally just random Japanese words.
This is jargon, yeah.
And someone let me know in the comment section, was he this Japanese in the Japanese release? Like, you know what I mean? Did they change it at all? Or did they have like a sense of humor about it? I don't know, but I was just like, this doesn't feel awesome.
Oh yeah, no, this game was notoriously, full of racial stereotypes. We definitely need to talk a bit about that. Especially, and I remember on some small level thinking like, well, maybe they learned with the sequel. No, there's some racial stereotypes in that one too.
Almost as upsetting as the insensitivities of the past is, for Joy-Cons, Mr. Dream. Mr. Dream, we have to say he's a Joy-Con, because like removing Mike Tyson as the last boss and putting in Mr. Dream, it makes the final boss feel just generic and unintimidating. And you don't want the final boss to feel like a watered down version of something. the final boss in a game should be the tensest, most epic feeling. And so, like, I think Mr. Dream, it's not that I have a problem with him being, replaced, Mike Tyson being replaced, but like Mr. Dream, there's nothing memorable about him. There's no personality to him. It's almost like they pretended like this fictional character had the clout of Mike Tyson, which obviously he doesn't. So I think the only thing we remember about Mr. Dream is who he replaced, which I think might make Mr. Dream the most hated video game character of all time. I don't know if anyone has an academic argument, but I think we have to say that's a Joy-Con about these characters. Is just
I don't think we do.
No?
No, because I mean, for the extent that is still known as a difficult fight, like, Brian, was that fight easier because it wasn't Mike Tyson?
Oh no, I mean, if anything, I feel like it's kind of a mixed bag, given that he's more or less just a reskin of Mike Tyson.
Complete reskin, exactly.
Yeah,
the
they
same
just color him
gameplay-wise.
differently and like do the pixels a little bit differently on the face, so it's obviously not Mike Tyson. But on the flip side, I did appreciate that his fight mechanics are identical. So it's not like you had to figure out something new. It's just that they didn't have the license anymore. And
Okay.
but
Yeah, and I get the impression like it's the difficulty of that fight that really was a bigger deal necessarily than who the fight was against per se.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
I mean, like, when you get into things like the utterly insane quest to beat him blindfolded.
Yeah.
Someone's trying to do that.
Not just trying to.
They did.
There are competitions of this, and the fact that people can even do this. I know Mike and I are both fans of Summoning Salt, the YouTuber who creates these videos of world record progressions with various games and speedrunning. But he himself is, I think he still holds the current world record on this game. Yeah.
18 minutes, 3 seconds for blindfolded.
Yes, yeah, and I just remember as soon as he dropped that video of like the progression, the world record progression of blindfolded Mike Tyson's punch out, I was like, oh my god, this exists, and people can do it.
This started with a stretch of just there was a streamer, D-Tysonator, who was trying to just beat Mike Tyson blindfolded, and they did some stuff with like games done quick of starting to play it blindfolded, and they've gotten to the point where it's a full speed run.
Yeah.
And actually, I watched something of two of the prominent speedrunners, Sinister1 and Zollard1, did a 2 players, 1 controller speed run of it, where they're
my god,
they are both blindfolded.
Oh
and
my god,
Zollard1 is handling the D-pad, and Sinister1 is handling the punches, and so they are having to keep synchronized.
That's insane.
Look, when people are this good, like they have to create new challenges.
Yeah, and they beat the game in like 25 minutes.
Well, I mean, it goes to show you, I mean, for one thing, that there's a lot that can be done just by the audio cues and also just knowing the patterns of certain players and then synchronizing that to either the music or whatever you're using as a cue for when to hit and when to block and when to dodge. But there's also so much RNG in it, and the fact that people were able to figure out how to beat somebody like Mike Tyson, who knocks you out if he punches you once. It's insane, and people get. I mean, like as he details in his blindfolded Mike Tyson video, like they used to think that it was impossible to do it blindfolded to beat Mike Tyson, but now people regularly do. So, yeah.
Though, since you bring up the music, Brian, did you recognize the Don Flamenco intro music?
Oh, it's yes, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it was isn't it it's the Toreadors? Is that the piece from
that one?
Well, from Carmen, right?
That's the other important part here. Is I really like this touch that they did, since it is March of the Toreadors from Carmen.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Don Flamenco will say in between rounds, is "Carmen, my love, I dance so sweet for you."
Oh,
and I really appreciated that bit. And I didn't see anything that actually could put together that, and that his music is from Carmen.
That's fun.
I see. Oh, it was a nice touch. I didn't put that together, but Yeah, it's nice that they did that, especially considering, I mean, there's also infamously other uses of music that are a little racist, including in Piston Honda's intro and Reycarlo in the sequel. But that little touch on, somebody was cultured to know their Bizet, their
Yeah. Well, I
Carmen.
mean, after I fought him 35 times, and I kept being like, I know this music, and I kind of had to work out. It's like I know it. I have some idea what this is. What exactly is this?
That's
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah, and he's entering in like a bullfighter, which is what the theme is
Yeah,
meant to be.
with the rose in his mouth and everything. It's
Oh
super
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Let's take a look at the Super Punch-Out characters. I think just going from, one screen of characters to the other one, this one from the characters database, I think the Super Punch-Out characters are really cool looking. I think they're very colorful. I think they're super well animated. They take up huge parts of the screen. Like, just I remember seeing a commercial as a kid for Super Punch-Out, and as a Genesis kid being so jealous because the characters looked so big. They looked like ripped out of a cartoon. And I really liked their huge range of really wacky and unkosher attacks. Dragon Chan, who is like the sort of Bruce Lee kind of character, he'll like jump from the turnbuckle and kick you in the face. And like,
That cannot be within the rules.
I was about to
yeah,
say, like, I have to touch on that with this game. How, like, not only do you not have coaches with you, but where are the referees and why are so many people cheating? Like, this is not an officially sanctioned boxing match with because I think it's like, yeah, he Dragon Chan, like, he leaps off the ropes, he kicks you. It's almost very Daniel-san in
and your
Karate
mouth
Kid.
guard will fly
I
out.
should note the Nintendo Video Boxing Association rules does specifically say there are no illegal moves or punches, but I do still feel like kicking
Was that in the
is
manual?
yes.
That's
Yeah,
hilarious.
I mean, this is not kickboxing. This is boxing. That and, like, what's it? Masked Muscle will headbutt you, spit in your eyes.
Yeah, but it's cool though because if he spits in your eye, the screen will pixelate and you can't see where he is.
Yeah, if anything, it feels like, well, maybe I'm just associating this because I'm also a big fan of Bloodsport, which is not a boxing movie, but it's like an MMA movie, and like, infamously right at the end when Jean-Claude Van Damme is got the upper hand on Chong Li like throws that powder into his eyes and he's like blinded for the rest of the fight. And I remember even as a kid watching this going like, how is nobody seeing this? Like, he's blinded and they're just letting the fight continue, like, but I know that was meant to be underground fighting and like no holds barred type of thing, but come on, what's all the cheating?
I think Yokohama used to do that in wrestling too with Salt.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, ooh, that sounds like, well, I mean, also, like, Mad Clown throws his juggling balls at you. Like, how is this allowed? Where's Mario? Where's the referees? This is ridiculous.
I mean, I don't think Mario is the referee in this.
Yeah, this one doesn't have a referee.
No, not at all. I don't think so. Yeah.
Or it does, but you don't see them.
Yeah,
You just hear them. You hear them counting. So since we're just on the topic, any idea which character has the most rule infractions? Because the Bumbles McFumbles wiki tracked them all. So if you guys had to guess, which Super Punch-Out character do you think is the biggest cheater?
As covered, there are no illegal moves or punches. So
compared to real boxing rules.
I mean, I actually took note every time I saw that somebody did something that I considered cheating.
Okay.
I'm going to go with whichever guy has the stick.
You'd think it'd be him, but it's not.
I mean, I got to give it to
Reycarlo.
Masked Muscle because everybody seems to have like Reycarlo using the stick, and the aforementioned Dragon Chan, and yeah, like there's or even what's his name, Heike Kagero, with like when he whips you with his hair.
Whips you with his hair.
I mean, obviously in real life that wouldn't really hurt, but like, like that doesn't seem like it's sanctioned. But but the fact that Masked Muscle both headbutts and spits in your eyes, and apparently spit in the referee's eyes too, because they're not seeing shit. Like,
yeah,
I gotta give it to Masked Muscle.
It's actually Mad Clown on the technicality because each foreign object brought into the ring is a separate violation. So each of his 6 juggling balls counts as a rule infraction. Aaron Ryan is the only one who follows all standard boxing rules, interestingly enough.
Oh, well, good on him.
Joy-Cons for these characters, like, I think the three returning characters, Bald Bull, Mr. Sandman, Super Macho Man, I think they're all kind of generic choices to of all the cool characters from the first one to bring back. I wonder why those three. And I really think the final two characters in this one are kind of a bummer. Nick Bruiser and Rick Bruiser. They're just not only are they palette swaps of each other, but there's just nothing memorable about them. Like it's not Tyson, it's not Mr. Dream. I'm not going to remember a single thing about these fights, despite the fact that yes, I did beat this game.
Nintendo. Family computer.
Yeah. Well done.
Ryan, you started this just recently, so I'm gonna guess you didn't beat Super Punch Out?
I didn't, but I am familiar with all these characters as well from from watching speedruns and what have you. And I mean, I like I said early in this podcast, like I know I'm going to be generally biased towards the one that I'm more nostalgic for, the Mike Tyson's Punch Out. But
Yeah.
To these characters' credit, in Super Punch Out, like you touched on it, how obviously the graphics take an upgrade with the SNES, and you see much more of a color palette, much more detail with these characters, especially since they're so much larger, and it actually looks like a genuine camera angle, from like behind Little Mac's perspective, which was the scaling in the original game was always so strange, and how tiny Little Mac looked, but even the villains too, how tiny they were on screen. So here you get a lot more character from just seeing them in more detail, like even just like every sprite of them, like in the original, obviously they reused sprites and recolored some of them, like you're seeing the same body that once they get knocked down, it just with different colors, whereas here, like everyone, like all the sprites were unique to each character because you were seeing them in much more detail. And on top of that, like I think I appreciated, as the person who was nostalgic for the first game, that Bald Bull, Mr. Sandman, and Super Macho Man were more or less the characters you remember, with the same kind of moves too, like the same bull charge, the same like Mr. Sandman still usually getting up at right at 9, which I think was he was the only character we did in the first game. Oh, and then like Super Macho Man, like well, on that note, I always found it weird how, like, because I think the first game described as Super Macho Man as 27, but he's got this full head of gray hair.
Right.
Which sort of seemed weird also because in NES, like I think when you would see his image when you're about to fight, he had the gray hair, but I think during the actual match, it's like black or something.
Yeah.
And whereas in this one, it's gray all the time. He doesn't look very 27 to me. I know some people go gray early, but
yeah, that's pretty early.
But I liked how, like, there was a little bit more detail of, like, I noticed Super Macho Man's eyes redden like when you're punching it.
Yeah, I saw that.
Little details like that weren't there with the original, or they just literally weren't enough pixels to show you extra little details like that. So that gave it a little bit more character. And to Nick Bruiser's credit, like, despite not being as maybe memorable as Mike Tyson, there's a lot of character in how he says no words. Like when you see that, there's always that quote from each fighter when you're about to fight them, and it's just dot 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 dot.
It's scary. He's staring you down.
He has nothing to tell you, and then the way he walks up to you, like very confidently with his guard down, just like almost like a Darth Vader-esque walk toward you. Like I felt like that made him more like visually intimidating, if that
That's cool.
Yeah, so I gotta give him that. Like I think there's a bit of character to, in part just because of the graphics upgrade, that they had a little bit more opportunity to imbue them with a little bit more character. But yeah, I don't know. I gotta give it to them using that to make the villain a little bit more intimidating, the way he approached you and stuff. Yeah.
Do either of you guys have anything else to say about the characters in these two games before we move on to our second round, the presentation?
Is Piston Hurricane just effectively a reskin redesign of Piston Honda?
Yeah, some people speculate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Piston Honda not making a return to Super Punch Out, but Piston Hurricane, and like the name and fighting styles are very similar.
Right, and I guess Piston Hurricane is Cuban, and so I'm assuming that's why they picked Hurricane, because lots of hurricanes in the
I didn't think about that. That's
I
funny.
don't know. I just figured, like, because otherwise Piston Honda seemed very on the nose with, like, oh, he's Japanese and they make Hondas, which have pistons.
Hondas have pistons.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I'm also, like, curious if you know, Jeremy, if there's any lore around the fact that Mad Clown more or less looks exactly like Bear Hugger, but in a in clown makeup. Like, is he Bear Hugger or is he like?
Yeah, it's funny because like so you say like there's no palette swaps. I think there are technically like palette swaps in the sense that some fighters share like frame data, and so like
Sure.
it looks like he's the same size. But you're right though. I never really thought about it. If Bear Hugger shaved his beard, he could be Mad Clown.
Well, he even taunts you in that same way, where he's just like, "Hey, come on, hit me," you know, like. But I know they're reusing that animation, but it made me think right to like Homer and Krusty from The Simpsons, because I know, I know that was sort of what they were originally conceiving for Homer. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I
I
know
heard that before.
that's part of the reason why the physical design of Homer and Krusty are so similar. Because I think early in the development of Krusty, the idea is that he was literally Homer.
Yeah, the idea was that you'd have this situation that Bart hates his father and idolizes Krusty, with the dramatic irony being that they are in fact the same person.
Right, right. But then ultimately, they obviously, made them separate characters, and they leaned on the fact that they looked so physically similar in that episode where Homer goes to clown college and everything. So in a lot of ways, I feel like, the fact that Mad Clown, I guess, actually isn't Bear Hugger, but looks so much like Bear Hugger in a clown outfit makes it very much like Homer and Krusty in that vein.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Judges, if you take a moment to make your decisions between Punch Out and Super Punch Out for characters, and we will announce that at the end of the match. I know that's not how boxing worked, Mike, but I've thought
Okay.
about this a lot. Yeah. So then let's move on to presentation. The NES game. It has this really dramatic and exciting flair to it. Characters flinch and they flail when they're striking each other. When they collapse, their bodies sort of bounce off the ring a little bit. The crowd is shifting in their seats with excitement. For an old game, this looks good. Like, it's very pleasing to the eye. And one of my favorite parts about the NES version of Punch Out is that, the original arcade release, it had a behind the boxer perspective. And the arcade version is one that came first. And you would have Little Mac, or actually he didn't really have a name in that game. He would be portrayed via wireframes. So he was a transparent character. So the person in the arcade would be looking through their own character to see the animations of their opponent. They couldn't do that on the NES. They couldn't render transparent graphics and have different layers like that. So the decision was made to make Mac tiny, make Little Mac really, really small. But I think I don't know if you guys agree, it gives the whole game this really thrilling, like David versus Goliath, like Shadow of the Colossus. It looks like Little Mac is helpless and hopeless. And so it just endears you to him to, between his punches and your timing, you guys can do it together. I like Little Mac. Like, I really felt for him. What do you guys think about him? Rather, the way the game portrays the fights.
No, absolutely. As much as it seems kind of almost ridiculous the size difference between Little Mac and his opponents, and especially because you're being that Little Mac is in the foreground and he's that small. Like, there was something about it, especially as a kid, just like it just made him seem, yeah, like a David and Goliath situation. It made it seem like insurmountable, and you always root for the underdog, and you were playing him, this character who is so much smaller. I mean, obviously, like, there's some, if that's really how small he is compared to his opponents, there's some real problem with the weight class distribution of the boxing, whoever's running the boxing league, I guess, in this universe. But there's something about just how diminutive he is in that game that just endeared you to him.
Yeah. I agree with Mike too. Also, having Mario as the referee is really fun. According to a 2009 Kotaku article by Owen Good, Mario was put in his game without permission. It was just a little placeholder that they put in for fun. And when they sent it up to the Nintendo higher ups, they were shocked that it wasn't kicked back down to them. Yeah, apparently, like, I think it was Shigeru Miyamoto said, like, yeah, it totally skipped my mind, which is why if you look at Mario, his proportions and his features are not quite right. It's because it was never officially Nintendo approved animated. It was just something that kind of snuck through, which I thought was really fun.
Well, I guess he's never really referred to as Mario in that game too.
Yes,
So
he
I
is.
guess. Oh, is he?
Yeah, no, he is. We'll get.
He gets flirted with by name, which I think really questions whether or not that's an impartial referee at that point. But
Oh,
when
What are you
you have,
referring to?
there is one of the boxers is like, oh, oh, I really like your hair, Mario.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they
Who's that?
somebody name drops him. I forget exactly who, but I remember seeing that too. So
I
okay,
think
yeah,
that was
yeah.
Don.
Oh, Don Flamenco.
I see.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay. Well, you guys already touched on the, screens between fights showing the characters talking from the corners, the training cutscene with that iconic music, and then at the end of the first two circuits, or sorry, after the final circuit, there's even a newspaper clipping declaring Little Mac as the new champion. It's got a couple of noteworthy Easter eggs if you look closely. The previous champion, Macho Man, doesn't seem to remember that he lost legitimately because he's wondering where his belt is. And also, it's weird where I lost my belt, Macho, where is? Like, what's going on with the jumbled text in the bottom left corner of this screenshot? Do you guys have any idea what they're trying to communicate?
Clearly, this newspaper needs better proofreading.
I think or just
Something.
that he's punch drunk and paying. I mean, he's paying for the ad.
Yeah, I could see.
I do like that it's an April 1st issue.
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
Well, it's clever because when they show this newspaper, he's the new champ, but the game ain't over yet. There's one more circuit to do, so it's almost like April Fools. You're the new champ. You got to go one more. And then I also thought it was fun because the other training cutscenes is where you get your passwords to pick up where you
right,
left off. And I like how Mario claims to have found. Well, it says he found a key, and then he gives you the passcode.
right.
So I don't know. All my Joy Cons.
What about the daddy come back home part?
Oh yeah, what the newspaper. It says "Daddy, come back home." Is it like a Rocky thing? Brian, doesn't Rocky have a kid at some point?
He does in Rocky 2 onward, but like I don't know. Like the funny thing is, I've read that a lot, and I've never really given it thought until now. I'm like, yeah, what is up with that? Like, is
Yeah.
Little Mac a deadbeat dad? I'm like,
It's broken up. Like it's meant to be either its own thing or that it's carrying over from the left column, which would imply that this is further ramblings from Macho
Oh,
Man.
Macho Man.
I gotta
Yeah,
say, like
maybe.
in my head canon now, I like to think that this is like a bit of a callback to more or less the plot of Rocky 5 is that Rocky gets too caught up in well, I mean at that point he wasn't boxing, he was a coach for Tommy Gunn, but like he was neglecting his son the whole. That's why like Rocky 5 I feel like is really a movie about fatherhood and
I've got a pitch for what's going on here.
Yeah.
Is this is in effect supposed to represent that your character is not really a boxer. This whole thing is a coma. That's why it's a dream fight. That daddy
Hey.
come back home is one of those things where something from reality is bleeding in to the hallucination, dream, fantasy.
Mike, I love that. I want this to go viral. I think you cracked the code of Punch Out. We know Brian's wrong because Rocky 5 wouldn't come out for several years after Punch Out.
Oh, well, sure. I mean, but still, I mean, at least that's sort of why. Well, I'm not saying it's based on that necessarily.
I know. I'm just
But,
busting your chops.
oh, sure. Well, at the same time, it would also explain, like, I mean, a lot of people, myself included, was like, who the hell is this guy in Super Punch Out? Because he's blonde and he looks completely different. And I was like, wait, it's still
Yeah.
Little Mac? Like, I'm definitely one of those people going like, there was no need to to change his appearance that way. Like, I loved his like signature black hair and everything, and at least they kept his green gloves. Another thing that they could have at least put the boxer that Mike Tyson's fighting on the cover, like having green gloves because that was a signature thing for Little Mac. But yeah, but that would explain if Mike Tyson's Punch Out is just a fever or a coma dream, then maybe he just dreamed he had a different appearance and he's actually the blonde guy. So,
I'm with you though, Brian. So, we're comparing the presentation of Punch Out to Super Punch Out. I think the guy in Super Punch Out doesn't read as Little Mac to me. Now, that's
no,
probably because Little Mac's appearances in like Smash Brothers and modern things is more the NES version. Although the Super Nintendo version of Little Mac is what appears in Fight Night, the EA boxing game. But yeah, it's just even though it's graphically he's so much more detailed, it's definitely a step down. Before we leave the presentation of the NES one, my only Joy Cons are all contextual. It's limited hardware, but like the boxing rings themselves kind of lack detail. Some of the animations look kind of stiff and a lot of the attacks are reused from character to character. But 1987, like how much are you going to expect? I think it's aged better than I expected it to, personally.
yeah,
The presentation for Super Punch-Out, we kind of already touched on it, but like you got these really big characters now. The punching sounds I thought were a lot better in Super Punch-Out. And again, Super Nintendo had a better sound card. Like I know that. But
Yeah,
like in
like now you can
Punch-Out, it's
actually
like
tell what the words are rather than just
yeah, yeah, exactly. But that smacking sound of the, pummeling each other in the face. Super Punch Out sounds like it hurts,
Mm.
and so I think that's, pretty cool. I also like how the coaches will shout advice from the corners. So you see little word bubbles pop up. This would be done from the characters, right, Mike? And the first Punch Out characters would say things, but the coaches weren't shouting from the corners. You don't remember that, right? I don't ever remember that happening.
Oh, in the first game, no.
During the match, there's not.
Yeah.
Right. But in Super Punch Out during the match, the coaches will be shouting
Yeah.
things. And, it's cool because from like a storytelling perspective, they're telling their fighter what to do, but it's also one of your tells. It's a warning of what attack's gonna come up. Like when the coach tells Mass Muscle, spit him in the eye. Well, now you better get ready to dodge because there's spit coming at you.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, they use it as a form of tell, that
Yeah.
because you're like Little Mac, I guess, doesn't have a coach in this game, so you're only hearing the enemy's coach, and that's
Right.
that's giving you a clue as to what they're about to do.
The last thing, and it's kind of minor, but I sort of enjoyed after each victory, you have like this almost Pokemon Snap style breakdown of like, here's every punch you threw, here's how many points is worth, how many special, scenarios you got. So if you're chasing a high score, I think it's kind of cool. I think though Joy Cons as far as presentation, you miss Mario as the ref, you miss Doc Lewis entirely. Like what a bummer. The music, like on paper, the music is better, but like you said, Brian, that training music, dun 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 dun.
Hell yeah.
It's just nothing in Super Punch Out is quite as memorable, and I think the redesign is a step down for Little Mac.
Yeah. Well, plus, he also just generally comes off as a little cockier in this game, I guess. And maybe that's also in part because, like, I mean, just all around the presentation of Little Mac in the first game, he feels more like the underdog. He's literally smaller, whereas like his little whatever Little Mac says in the sequel when he wins, that always makes him come off as like a little like
Yeah.
right. And like, in the original, it was, especially the other thing that, I mean, this used to bug me how like if you would get knocked down even once in a certain match, but then you knock the other guy down twice. Like Little Mac would on round 2, he would have the bruises and the bandage, but the other guy would be fine. Like it almost seemed like Little Mac was more fragile.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. That's
yeah.
funny. Anything else to say about the presentation of Super Punch Out before we go into our final round?
I just don't think it looks good.
You don't like the look of it?
No.
No. Just straight up, just the aesthetic isn't for you.
Yeah, I don't think it looks as interesting or as memorable.
Despite the fact that the graphics are clearer and have more frames of animation, it's not for you.
Yeah, because that doesn't make it better.
I guess so.
I'm there with you. I mean, I'm a bit of a mixed bag of like, like I kind of said before, like the presentation, and the capabilities of the SNES gave a lot more of a color palette and more detail and stuff like that, and they have more character in that way. But there's just also something so endearing about the presentation in the NES version that I can't quite put my finger on that.
No.
And on some level I know that's rose tinted glasses that I'm looking through, but
yeah, from no glasses, the NES one feels more feels like it has a more iconic look to it, and this feels just really generic to me.
It's more like Street Fighter, like
Yeah.
It's the Street Fighter era.
And again, I wonder how much of this might be because I have that nostalgia connection, but like I feel like the music in the first game is better.
Yeah. I honestly can't remember any of the music from this.
Yeah.
And I was playing it right before this.
Yeah. Whereas like there's like that first game's theme, like that theme, the training theme, the title screen theme, they're all just so iconic. So yeah, I gotta give it to the music on the first one.
Well, so everyone, judges kind of tally your results here because we're going to go on to round number 3, which is gameplay. So we've touched on it a lot already, but I think that the devs for the Nintendo Punch-Out, they really discovered something novel here because it's kind of more of a rhythm game than a traditional fighting game. It's all about timing. It's about, reading, and it's like quick reflexes versus pure aggression. And there's something just really challenging, or excuse me, really appealing about a challenge as steep as this. To me, it like Souls-born games like Dark Souls borrow some DNA from Punch Out because it's just like this feels so unfair, and that makes me want to persevere. I want to overcome this because it feels like you can't. And overcoming insurmountable odds really endears you to the character, and it makes you feel good as a player when you finally, climb that Everest. I think the controls were really genius in their simplicity because you have the Nintendo controller with B and A, so you got left and right, right? B is you see B is on the left. Yeah, so B is your left and A button is your right. And it just feels right. You're like, okay, that button does that, that does that. What I love when a game, the button presses correspond very obviously and very satisfyingly to what's happening on the screen. And I think the coolest example of that is the super attack system in the NES Punch Out, the original Punch Out, because if you hit your opponent when they're weakest, when they expose themselves, Little Mac will get a star. It'll go, and
Oh
now
god,
you
I
have
love that sound effect too.
Isn't that so satisfying,
Yeah,
Brian?
yeah, yeah.
And now you get a super uppercut where if you press the select button, Little Mac will just do a really powerful blow straight to the face. And the reason that's so
Start, not
genius,
select.
sorry, start
Right.
button. But the point though is that it's not the A and B button, so you have to reach off of your normal attacks. And so that little extra, quarter of an inch distance, it's slowing you down.
Yeah, it takes more time to trigger it. It takes more time to throw it.
Which is what an uppercut is.
Yeah.
It's a slower but more damaging and riskier attack, and it's just like it's genius. It's
Oh yeah.
freaking genius.
Yeah,
It's
I
so
definitely
cool.
realized like I loved using that mechanic so much, but I know there were many times that like, especially against Piston Honda, when you have the time to hit that star punch and you didn't hit it soon enough and he dodges, and so it's just like you have to you have to factor that and wait for the time to unleash them, especially given that if you get punched, they get taken away from you.
So mean.
So you really have to like, as soon as you earn that star, like, okay, I don't want to lose it, and I got to find the right moment to hit it and make sure I have enough time, because there aren't like, not every window where you can punch the opponent is a window where the star punch will hit them. So
Correct. Yeah. Absolutely. And do you guys have anything else to say about what you like about the gameplay? Because I'm about to drag it a little bit. There's a couple things that annoy me about the way the first Punch Out plays.
I will say I really do appreciate a couple of them. I think are a little too small, but the extent that this uses some amount of telegraphing what's going on, so that there's a little bit of feeding into sort of the timing.
Yeah.
The Grand Tiger, or whatever, comes to mind on this.
Great Tiger.
Yeah.
Great
Oh,
Tiger.
yeah.
There we go.
Because
Yeah,
you got
the,
that little gem that flickers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Piston Honda with the eyebrow wiggle. Like, there's always something kind of to look for there. That I mean, I know that there's an element to that certainly in Super Punch Out as well, but it's the tells that are also just so signature about that first game, and also the times where you wouldn't, where like certain fighters infamously don't give you a tell, like Mr. Sandman when he does his like triple uppercuts. Like, you just have to learn the timing of that one, because he's not gonna, especially I think it's like every time he gets up from a knockout, he doesn't give you a tell. Like, you just have to know, oh, when he gets up from a knockout, he's gonna hit you with those 3 uppercuts, and you just have to remember the timing of that.
Him getting up is the tell, which is
Oh, yeah.
tough to remember. Yeah.
And it's also like I like I said before, like I couldn't have been able to do these without looking up strategies, and I saw that, oh, when he does those triple uppercuts, you can't even, like, you have to dodge them, and you can't dodge the same direction every time. You actually have to alternate them.
Oh.
And even knowing that, and even with the rewind feature, I tried so hard to successfully dodge all 3 of his uppercuts. Anytime he did that, I could only dodge 2. My finger speed was just not fast enough, even knowing exactly what I had to do. So yeah, that was a pain. So I remember Mr. Sandman, every time he did the triple uppercut, I had to take 1 punch because I just wasn't fast enough. So I wasn't able to beat him without getting knocked out.
Were you trying the sort of buffering approach, or were you trying to hit the directions as they happen?
Well, because he didn't give you that tell, it was just a matter of just trying to like time it based off of the music after he would come back.
Oh yeah.
Like, and how long? Okay, now, too late. Rewind. How long? Too early. Come back. And then even when I would get into that groove, I could not dodge all three. It was a dodge, take a hit.
This is definitely one of those games where, like, even with rewind, it felt like a freaking achievement because it's just like this is trial and error, even just that much. I have to complain though about the fighting spirit meter because it just annoys me. In the NES original, you have a little heart meter at the top, and that's basically how many punches you get to throw. And like every time your hit gets blocked or something, your hearts go down. And every time, you lose a heart whenever your punches are blocked or dodged. You lose 3 hearts every time you're hit. If it hits 0, Little Mac becomes exhausted and all you can do is dodge. Now you can't lift your arms.
Yeah.
I just felt like this game was hard without that. The life meter just being clobbered by their blows. I didn't also need to get excited. I get why, or exhausted. I mean, I understand storytelling wise why that's there. I just felt like it was one unfairness too many that when it would happen, I would just kind of I wouldn't have fun. I'd be like, well, this is lame.
I'll give you that. Like I remember never liking that Don Flamenco. You have to punch him to get him to do that uppercut and then find that weakness, which meant he was intentionally draining hearts. That's literally his strategy, including when you fight him the second time. And it's like, come on, man. Like, I know you're going to block this and you're just draining my hearts. And I think, I mean, I've seen speedrunners beat it without tiring out. So there's clearly some method that you can do without having to do that. But I always found it frustrating that most of us who don't know those expert strategies, like it seemed like it was impossible to beat Don Flamenco without draining your hearts. And I hated that.
I think that's what makes this more of a puzzle game.
Yeah.
Because that was the frustration point until I sort of figured that out. I think once I figured out how that factors in, I think the only spot that it became still frustrating to me was specifically Ground Tiger, and that's because
Great Tiger,
whatever.
He does it differently every time. He's like Big Tiger, Ground Tiger, Tony the Tiger.
I kept track of fighters with their initials, so I have their initials, and that's it.
GT
was because of how much time comes off that clock for his major attack is the and at the end of that is your chance to knock him out, is to go through that and have had that fighting spirit, whatever stuff, drained off so that you reach that and can't punch him, and that is incredibly frustrating. I feel like if you reach the end of that, it should give you back 1 if you're at 0 in that specific circumstance.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that would be nice, and especially given that me personally, like as a kid, I could not get past Great Tiger. So when I finally beat him on the Switch, like you guys don't know how happy I was. And I know he's like in the middle of the game. He's nowhere near it. Like the fact that well, that's why every time
he was your nemesis.
Oh yeah, and every time I found a way to get past like another boxer after him, like it was surreal for me because oh my god, I'm entering territory that even though I've played so many times by other people, I never got to this point. So just oh my god, beating Great Tiger, so sad.
You're having that.
He was really frustrating.
Yeah.
But there's even a Brooklyn Nine-Nine joke about it. But like,
about beating Great Tiger.
About beating Great Tiger, yeah.
Nice.
But it's just the fact that you had that reaction to it, like I think it really says that this game is special.
Yeah.
The one other mechanic with this that I think is very frustrating in how it's implemented, I think it's just a little too unforgiving, is that this breaks this up into 3 rounds and you have to get 3 knockdowns in a single round. And if you go 3 rounds, it I think is just by default you lose.
No, I mean you can win by decision, but I mean it has to be pretty clear that I think, or at least I think it's just the number of knockouts, I guess, at that point.
It's definitely not number of knockouts, because I think I lost on a decision where I think I'd been knocked down once total, and I think it was like 5 knockdowns that I'd had.
Okay. Yeah, I mean I know there's ways to win by decision, but you're right. It's not exactly fair. I don't know what game Mario plays here.
Yeah, Mario is not unbiased. There was definitely decisions, and I was like, based on what?
And the manual says like it'll be by decision, but look out for hometown advantage. And then obviously the SNES is much more explicit that if it goes to decision, you lose.
I mean, clearly, Mass Muscle must have spit in Mario's eyes too, because
that
it is not
was not this
fair
game.
judgment.
That was the next game.
Right.
But getting back to the Super Nintendo version now, it's just the gameplay wise, it's just notably faster. You can just string boom, 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 boom. The combo attacks feel more like what I'm used to as a Street Fighter player, of just one punch after the other. And especially when you consider the way that the super attacks are different. Instead of having a set number of uppercuts you can do, if you land enough blows in a row without getting hit or without having to block, I think it is, your super meter across the bottom of the screen in the Super Nintendo version will now flash, and now you can press the X button, and those are your super powered punches, and they go like they have like a cool like wind sound effect. And what I loved about it is that you can keep unleashing these until they hit you. So if you really kind of get in the pocket and just kind of start wailing on them, it's incredibly satisfying to see their life bar just melt with just one super attack after the other. I didn't feel as clear cut, but to me, it was more satisfying and more exciting than
Yeah,
just
see, it
little
just goes to
mechanic
show I
punch.
need to play the Super Punch Out a little more, because I don't think I ever quite got that super meter full, and I was
Mm,
constantly like having to. I mean, I didn't have as much time with that game too to really understand all the mechanics like that. But to have that fully charged up and be able to do that, yeah, that's got to be really satisfying, because there's really no similar mechanic, I guess, in the first one.
yeah,
You either had
yeah.
hearts or you didn't.
You had to pick your moment the whole fight, but this game lets you become like a runaway train.
I see.
And that's just it. I felt as powerful as some of the cheater opponents from the first game, and I was like, this is cool.
Yeah.
This is fun. The heart mechanics is gone, which I freaking, I'm happy to see it gone. So, kind of simplified the game that way. And it felt like less opponents had like these hyper damaging attacks where it's like, okay, 2 hits and I'm done. That seemed like a symptom of the NES game that, it's a bit more fair here. I think there's a bit more room margin for error on the Super Punch Out version. So it felt more to me like a fighting game. I'm not just desperately having to dodge blows the whole time. We're trading blows against each other. And I don't know. I thought it was kind of rad. Mike, what's your take on the gameplay? You didn't like how it looked. Do you like how it plays?
No, I thought it felt less responsive, and even when I was winning, I couldn't see anything different in when I would win and when I would lose big time. It just didn't. I didn't feel like it was giving me anything in that.
So you felt like you had less agency and therefore less invested in your success or failure.
I wouldn't say less agency, because less agency implies that it has to do with more what I'm doing. It's more just agency implies that something else is controlling this. This is just, it feels almost more arbitrary to me.
Huh.
Hmm.
Okay. Nintendo Switch Online does offer an SP edition. If you boot it up, you can start on the final circuit. But I don't really get why you'd want to do that, because to me the whole fun of these games is going through and seeing all these wacky characters and seeing their attacks, and like, why would you want to skip so much of the game?
Oh, I know
Um,
entirely why.
what is that?
Just because you've beaten a circuit doesn't mean you get access to that last circuit.
Right. Yeah, I have to, I'm with Mike in that. But
Oh,
at the very least, it's nice that it allowed people to jump to this point if they want, if they've obviously previously beaten this kind of up to here. Like,
To get to the final circuit, you have to go 4-0 on the first 3 circuits. It's not just that you've won them; it's you have to win them with 0 knockouts for all 3.
let's see, yeah.
yeah. So it's allowing you to like, okay, I beat all these circuits. I don't want to have to do a perfect run. I'll boot up SP mode just to see what the last circuit is like. No, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
I mean, much like how in the first game it would give you codes to just like, if you got all the way to Mike Tyson, here's your code to get to Mike Tyson. Or I think with each title, like it would give you a new code so that you had the option to just jump there, because not everybody had the time to start from the beginning, especially if you're trying to train at beating Mike Tyson, who's so damn hard. You can just jump right to him.
What did you guys think about the 2-player mode?
Oh, I never actually quite used it, to be honest.
I didn't know it had it.
Yeah.
Neither did anybody, Mike. Amazingly, as detailed by IGN writer Kat Baylor, Super Punch-Out had a secret 2-player mode that went undiscovered for 28 years.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it was probably never officially disclosed because it's not exactly well balanced, but I think it's really neat, and I wish they had fine-tuned it and made it in the official inclusion. I think people would look at the sequel very differently if they knew that there was a way to do 2-player mode. Little Mac versus the other player controls the cartoonish, overpowered opponents. And I followed the tutorial online. I confirmed it works, holding 2 different controllers, and it looks really neat.
To play it the way Homer and Bart played it.
To
Like
play the
why
way
aren't
Homer and Bart played it.
why aren't you would think that'd be intuitive for a fighting game. I never even realized that it could have used that.
So we'll definitely have to check that out later. And you know what? Join the Discord if you want to try to do some online Super Punch Out. As far as the Super Nintendo version Joy Cons of the gameplay, I hate what Mike mentioned earlier, where it's like at the end of a fight, it's over if you don't knock them out. You can't win by decision in Super Punch Out. And I was like, why? Why did you take out that one little extra element of strategy? And it's weird too because it doesn't make it super clear. It'll just show you your stats and then just take you back to the beginning of the match. There's never anything that says like you lose. You just have to knock them out. But it's like so much of boxing is technical. I don't get why they would remove that entirely.
To go back to Rocky for one thing, like the first fight, like the whole idea is that, like, even though, I mean, I don't think this is too much of a spoiler to say it's one of the things that makes this movie so famous, but Rocky loses in
Yeah,
Rocky
I've
1.
heard that.
Yeah, and but it still feels like a triumph because he made it all 10 rounds. Like he went the distance with the champ. It didn't matter that he lost by decision, So it's such an iconic thing about, like, like a lot of boxing matches end with by decision. So,
And honestly, a lot of boxing movies that I've seen end with some sort of fraud. So this idea that
so the fact that people are cheating in Super Punch Out, it's like, all right.
yeah, or at least that, like, no, the fix is in. You have to knock them out because that's the only way you're going to win.
I
Like,
get you.
if anything, I wish it had leaned into that as an actual, like, story element.
Sure.
That the ref is against you, so you gotta put him on the mat.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Get them like organized crime involved in this or something. It's like, that's why you're having to beat them this way.
Right.
Gotcha.
Well, especially considering that the decision, especially, I know at least with the first game, that that it clearly wasn't a fair decision. Like you said, Mike, like there are times where you clearly would have the upper hand and it wouldn't give it to you. But there were times that it did. So I'm kind of curious to see, like, what's the metric here? Do you have to like win 99% to kind of to
How
put
cool would it be if they made a live action sports mockumentary called Punch Out, and it was Doc Lewis and Little Mac, and it was a really good boxing movie, but you had like Bald Bull charging and you had like masked muscle spitting and stuff. I think that could be fun.
And hey, Mike Tyson is literally still fighting, or at least I know he's training for his
Big fight against
match.
Jake Paul.
It is weird that for him being from the first game,
Yeah,
it feels like the second game has a lot more rules broken. Like, if you're gonna bite an ear in one of these games, it would be Super Punch Out and not Punch Out.
100%. Yeah.
Well, if they were to make such a movie, they got to work in the infamous Holyfield ear bites.
I love that Mike Tyson makes a joke about that in Mike Tyson Mysteries, and I'm like, I really respect whoever on this crew told him we were going to joke about that, because I would be terrified to pitch that to Mike Tyson.
I mean, he definitely seems to have, served his time and really kind of tried to have a reformed life. So Mike Tyson's story is kind of one of the ones that kind of softens my heart more than a lot, because, I mean, he's done bad things, but also like, I feel like he's trying to do better.
Sure.
It certainly seems that way, so
no,
I think that's nice.
Definitely. And the fact that he has clearly a sense of humor about things, like, not obviously, like he literally did that, comedic animated show, but at the same time, he's willing to. I mean, look, he's very famously in The Hangover in a very comedic cameo.
He
still got it.
Yeah.
The Comic-Con panels for Mike Tyson Mysteries are amazing.
I know.
Because Mike Tyson just kind of goes, and everybody else is just having to sort of roll with it because he's Mike Tyson.
Yeah, that's what Mike Tyson does once that train gets rolling.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else to say about the gameplay for Super Punch Out?
It's a bit of a give and take for me, because I love the simplicity of the gameplay in the first one. It's part of why I'm personally biased towards the gameplay in that one, but I got to give it to the second one having a lot more dynamic kind of range of dodging and punching, and it definitely not just graphically kind of flex its muscle a bit more, but it made a bit more it added a little bit more variety, I guess, to the gameplay, which I do have to commend it for, even though I personally prefer the simplicity of the gameplay in the first.
I do find it odd that the speed record for Punch Out is like 14 minutes 40, and the speed run for Super Punch Out is 2 minutes 32.
I wonder how
And
that's possible.
And records are still being made. I don't know if you saw them, Mike, but I think like a couple weeks ago, Summoning Salt re-upped the record for because there's how everybody does the full speed run records and the individual opponent records, and I think he dropped the Mike Tyson win down to like 2 minutes or something. It's insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good for him. All right. Well, that's the bell. We'll give a moment for our judges to make the final decision. Let's go over the results for all 3 rounds in the old switcheroo punch out. Let's first talk about characters. So Brian, Mike, we'll start with Brian, our guest here. Which game do you think had the better characters, Punch Out or Super Punch Out?
I mean, I got to give it to Punch Out, if at least because I mean, and I know in small part I'm including Mike Tyson in this, and the fact that he's even though he wasn't in the version that we just played on Switch, it was Mr. Dream, but it was
He's in
him,
our
the
hearts.
combination of just all these unfortunately kind of racial stereotypes, but also just memorable characters in the first game. I mean, look, the second game certainly did a lot of that too, but I gotta
Not
give
quite
it
as
to
iconic.
I gotta give it to the first game's characters.
I would as well. I think that there's a reason that those have persisted in our minds. Mike, would you agree? Punch Out characters are better than Super Punch Out? Okay, so that's 3-0 for characters in favor
And you
of
got to
Punch
lump
Out.
in also the the non-playable characters of Doc Lewis
No,
and
it's
Mario.
true.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Doc Lewis and Mario. Like they add a lot. They really truly do.
Mhm.
All right, presentation. I'm also going to give this one to Punch Out. I think that just mostly it's just the iconic image of Little Mac looking so tiny against these huge opponents. That in a single frame tells the story of the whole game. You look at that and you get, okay, this is crazy, and how am I possibly going to overcome this? So I think the presentation, despite the graphical limitations, I would also give it to NES's Punch Out. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, there's a part of me that wants to give at least this one to Super Punch Out because of its the color palette and the use of the use of the SNES's capabilities. But that's really more like, I mean, obviously that doesn't the NES didn't have the capability to do stuff like that. So
you can't knock the NES version for not having a 16-bit system.
Absolutely. So I think taking into account the technological limitations of its systems and all the things that you just mentioned, like the physical size and how much more Little Mac just felt like an underdog in that game. Yeah, I gotta give it to NES.
Okay, and Mike, you don't like how this game looks, Super Punch Out. So
No, I do not. Punch Out gets that.
All right, and then round 3 was the gameplay. I'm giving this one to Super Punch Out. I think I'm a fan of fighting games. Super Punch Out felt more like a fighting game with the rapid combos, the super attacks. I think it felt better to beat Punch Out. It felt better to play Super Punch Out. Brian, which one are you giving gameplay?
Oof. That's also a really tough decision for me because I'm there with you in that, like, I like the complexity and the general feel of it being like a more of a fighting game in the second, but I feel like the first one is a little bit more of a puzzle game in that way that Mike mentioned before about trying to find individual weaknesses with each opponent. So yeah, I think I still got to give it to Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
No. I wanted Super Punch Out to get one of these. Mike?
Well, they should have made a better game. Yeah, no, I'm going Punch Out. It was more fun to play. It was more fun to win.
All right. Well, the winner of the old switcheroo Punch Out brought to you by the Cable Club podcast is officially Punch Out featuring Mr. Dream.
Yeah, Mike Tyson.
Well then, guys, let's wrap this up here and declare each of the games a NintenDO or a NintenDON'T, starting with NES Punch Out. If I can go this one first here, I think, Punch Out, it's such a well-known part of Nintendo history that I think you should check it out at least once. It's available both these games are available on the base level subscription. So you probably have access to this game right now. And when Mario declared me, Mike, a winner in the third round by decision, I beat Mr. Dream. I beat Tyson by decision, essentially. I felt it in my whole body. It felt, even though I cheated ridiculously, it still felt cool. So how can I not recommend a game? And I also think that this might be one of the best ways to play it. I think letting you have the option of rewinding makes it so much more accessible to the average gamer. Check it out. Punch Out's on Nintendo.
I mean, it makes it possible to beat. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, clearly, like for all the aforementioned reasons, like that, there's something about the whole package of Mike Tyson's Punch Out or Punch Out with Mr. Dream, if you will. But it's yeah, all around there's so much about that first game that made it such an iconic game for the NES system that and I'm still humming that theme to this day. All of the themes.
Yeah, Koji Kondo. He was made the Zelda music. Mario. He made the Mario 2 theme. That's one of your favorite.
Absolutely. Like honestly, like I feel like Koji Kondo needs to. I mean, not that he gets a great deal of credit as it is, but I think he's right up there with the great composers of our day, like John Williams. Like
I agree.
There's so much that he had to do and revolutionize for so many games. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's one of the greats.
Mike, Nintendo as well?
I guess so. Like, if this was a less iconic game, I think I would almost be tempted to go NintenDON'T. It's
okay.
I still has enough that I find frustrating, but it has sort of enough of an influence that it's probably worth checking out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worth noting that this game will piss you off. Like sometimes I'm, as much as I'm sitting here, on the high of the last couple of weeks of, I finally beat Great Tiger. Like, oh my God, I actually got to the final match. Like, it makes you forget about all the times that you are just swearing at this game.
Well, and I also want to point out, it's like I cheated. So do the opponents. Why can't I cheat if they cheat? If any game was going to be okay to cheat on, it's a game all about overcoming cheaters.
Oh yeah, but to anyone who hasn't played it yet, definitely fair warning. Like this game may piss you off too much. So like I definitely don't fault
get tilted.
Who might be thinking like, oh, it's just too frustrating and too aggravating. I mean, we need to play. We're mostly playing games to enjoy them, not to piss ourselves off. And so there needs to be. It
sounds like the middle of the road, like check guides thing, maybe the way to go.
Yeah.
To sort of
agree.
Get past some of that.
Not rewinding, but you still are like, okay, here's the weak spot, here's the tell.
Yeah. I mean, I fully acknowledge that if I wasn't using guides and hints and tips, then I don't think I could beat this game. Yeah, so my hat's off to anybody, if they exist, who's beaten it without getting any hints or knowing any strategies, because I feel like that borders on humanly impossible.
Yeah, and like proper like strategies normal humans can use. Because like I'm aware what speedrunners do, and I cannot do what speedrunners do. So
they're superhuman.
So some of their things where it's like, oh yeah, you punch, but then halfway through the punch, you shift the guard so that your punch goes through. It's like, yeah, I can't do that. So like, I need something that's obtainable, and none of that is.
Yeah, I get you.
And then how about Super Punch Out? Brian, what's your recommendation for this one? Nintendo or NintenDON'T?
I mean, I gotta give it a Nintendo. Like, even though I voted in every category in favor of the first one, this game surprised me too. Like, I think the characters are a lot of fun. They're like there's a lot more that they did graphically to use the SNES capabilities, and they made the gameplay a little bit more complex. Yeah, I mean it's no Mike Tyson's Punch Out, but it's a worthy sequel. I think it was a long time coming to finally play it.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think especially if you put in the code for 2-player mode, like just check that out, just because it's not a very difficult cheat to put in.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm sure we're gonna give it a try, and I don't know if you're gonna try to push all the way to the end of Super Punch Out without Mike Tyson or fake Mike Tyson at the end. It didn't feel nearly as interesting. But yeah, it's a good time. Nintendo. Mike, do I even need to ask?
No, it's definitely a Nintendo for me.
Are we a
Didn't.
Super Nintendo?
I would leave that for something even
Less competent.
worse. But yeah,
Okay.
it wasn't fun.
Well,
It didn't offer me much.
Well, guys, that is going to cover it here. We covered all the Joy Pros, the Joy Cons, and every bit in between. We are calling it game over for today. The winner of the old switcheroo Punch Out is Punch Out.
Yay.
The verdicts are Punch Out and Super Punch Out, both Nintendos. We had 3 Nintendos for the NES and 2 Nintendos and 1 Nintendo for the Super Nintendo, but it does still rule in favor of both these games. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us again. Before you go, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, you can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Bryan Lee. That's Bryan with a Y. And I wasn't able to grab that same screen name for Instagram, but I am on Instagram and TikTok as Bryan.S.Lee. And yeah, it's been a joy to finally join you guys for a gaming an actual gaming podcast, and especially for a game that I'm so nostalgic for, like Mike Tyson's Punch Out, and to have an excuse to finally this many years later try out its sequel.
I'm so happy. Everyone, join us next time when Mike and I will be slashing deeper into the Nintendo Switch online catalog in our epic quest to research and review them all. Next on the docket, when one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time, the epic, the iconic Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy Advance Four Swords multiplayer remake. Also, don't forget to visit www.theoldswitcharoo.com. There you can find links to our Spotify, our Discord, YouTube, TikTok, and all the social medias you can shake a joystick at. You can even leave an old-timey voicemail, meaning we would literally love to hear from you. Special thanks, as always, to Crystal Fields for our fantastic intro song. And thank you, dear listener, for liking, commenting, subscribing, and reviewing. This has been the Old Switcheroo, where we've been talking gaming retro with Mike and Jaymo.
I've been Mike.
And I've been Jaymo. Game on, everyone.
I don't understand why that's. Well, here, hold on. I got.
Hey, Mike, it's the music from Xevious.